The year is 112 AD, and dawn breaks over the outskirts of Rome. But for one woman, morning brings no warmth. A group of armed guards holler across a dirt road, dust kicking beneath her sandals as her legs buckle with every step. She has spent 3 days running 3 days where she felt something that Roman society insisted she should never experience: freedom. Thin, fragile, intoxicating freedom. Now it's over. The guards shove her inside a cramped workshop tucked behind an estate. The smell hits her first: smoke, hot metal, and something darker, something human. At the far end of the room stands an imperial stigmata, one of the empire's professional slave markers. He isn't angry, he isn't emotional, he is simply doing his job the way a scribe copies text or a baker kneads dough. Mechanical, routine, ordinary. Before him, iron rods glow in a bed of roaring coals, their tips shimmer like miniature suns. She tries to speak, to plead, maybe for mercy, maybe for time, maybe for anything at all. But the guards pin her in place. The stigmata lifts one of the irons. He distorts the air around it. He presses it to her forehead. Metal meets flesh. The world becomes sound. A sharp hiss cuts the air. Smoke rolls upward. The smell of burning skin, her skin fills the workshop. She screams, but the process continues without pause, without hesitation, without the slightest flicker of doubt. When the iron pulls away, 3 letters remain carved into her face: FVG, short for fugitive runaway. It isn't a punishment by Roman standards. It's procedure, legal protocol, a bureaucratic act carried out with the same level of fuss as stamping a document. The brand is permanent, visible from across a marketplace, a mark that cannot be hidden, erased, or forgotten. This was the first line of defense in Rome's system for handling female slaves who tried to escape a system that historians like Seneca, Tacitus, and Suetonius described not as anomalies or scandals, but as everyday parts of Roman life practices so normalized that they were recorded with the same tone used for census data or military reforms. The legal status of enslaved woman is not considered a person in Roman law. She is classified as a thing, a possession, an economic unit with no legal identity and no claim to her own body. Her master can do anything to her at any time for any reason. Part first, call first. No judge, no jury, no appeal, and when she runs, the law offers an entire catalog of approved punishments, written, codified, archived, a chilling reminder that Rome did not simply tolerate brutality, it organized it. Everyone knows the name Spartacus. Very few know what happened to the countless women who also tried to flee chains they never chose. Their stories rarely appear in films or textbooks, but the writers of the ancient world recorded them in stark detail. 5 punishments, 5 different methods Rome used to crush women who dared to seek the one thing the empire refused to grant them: control over their own lives. First punishment, branding. First punishment was branding, a mutilation engineered to last forever. This wasn't symbolic discipline. It was a public declaration. This woman belongs to someone. This woman tried to run. This woman is marked. The burn was carved onto the forehead deliberately, ensuring no hairstyle or garment could ever hide it. Some brands were even longer, carved with mocking words like "Hold me lest I flee." Being branded made her a walking warning sign, a piece of human propaganda. Other enslaved women saw that wound and understood exactly what could happen to them. The branding wasn't always private, either. Some estates dragged the accused into open marketplaces, letting crowds watch as the iron hissed. People passing through would hear the screams, smell the burning flesh, and continue their errands unchanged. For them, this wasn't horror, it was routine. Other slaves sometimes were forced to witness the branding as part of their training. The smell, the unmistakable scent of charred skin stayed in their minds forever. That was the point. Rome used pain as teaching material. Some enslaved women later tried to hide the brand with cloth or primitive cosmetics. If caught, the penalty was additional branding across the cheeks, this time carved deeper, designed to raise into permanent ridges of scar tissue. The stigmata heated the iron until it turned white, the hottest phase, where flesh doesn't simply burn but cooks. This ensured the wound destroyed as much tissue as possible without bleeding. The iron stayed pressed to the skin for a full count of 10, long enough for the nerves to scream, long enough for the skin to bubble, long enough for everyone around to remember the sight. It was a punishment that left scars on the body, but the psychological scars cut far deeper. In Roman culture, a woman's appearance was tightly controlled. A disfiguring brand was a punishment that followed her into every room, every interaction, every part of her existence. There was another tool Rome used: slave collars. Archaeologists have uncovered real examples catalogued in the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum. One reads, "Hold me, for I flee." Imagine living each day with a metal ring locked around your throat, a message engraved for strangers to read every time they looked at you. Branding was only the beginning. Visibility itself was part of the punishment. Second punishment, public chaining. Another method was chaining a runaway woman at the Ianua, the main entrance of a Roman household. This wasn't just any location. It was a symbolic border between private life and public street, the place where guests entered and neighbors passed. To be chained there meant becoming an object in the architecture, a living signpost advertising her failure. She could be shackled by wrists, by ankles, or both, sometimes forced to stand for hours, sometimes for days. She was displayed to strangers, neighbors, passers-by, and cruelest of all, to other enslaved women. Her humiliation became their lesson. Ancient Roman culture tied a woman's honor to her modesty. Forcing her into public view, especially if partially unclothed, was violence in itself. She became the punishment, a spectacle people could look at, mock, ignore, or use as a conversation topic on their way to the bakery. Basic necessities were withheld: food, water, rest. The shackles were often deliberately undersized, designed to dig into flesh until the skin tore. Infection followed. Gangrene was common. Some women lost digits as the metal cut off circulation. And nature was merciless. Summer heat blistered exposed skin. Winter winds froze her feet and hands. Rain soaked her clothes until the cold sank into her bones. She could do nothing but endure. Children threw scraps of spoiled food at her. Merchants spat at her feet. Other enslaved people were ordered to insult her, to break down her spirit piece by piece. Refusal meant taking her place. This wasn't a rare punishment. It wasn't unusual. It was woven into the daily fabric of Roman urban life, a quiet method in iron. Run. And this is what awaits. Two punishments, both engineered to humiliate, both designed to break the mind as much as the body. And Rome wasn't done, because the next wasn't about correction. It wasn't about discipline or law. It was about entertainment, about turning a woman's suffering into a public spectacle, about feeding her to beasts, and the crowds loved every moment of it. Third punishment, damnatio ad bestiae. When Rome wanted to send a harsher message, one that spread fear across entire estates, it didn't stop at branding or chaining. It dragged runaway women into the arena. This punishment had an official name: damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. But behind the formal Latin was a grim reality. A woman who ran from slavery could be murdered publicly as an entertainment. She wasn't trained as a gladiator. She wasn't given armor. She wasn't offered a chance. She was thrown into a spectacle engineered for death. This penalty wasn't reserved for violent offenses. It included desertion, rebellion, theft, and repeated escape attempts. For Rome, an enslaved person trying to flee wasn't merely breaking rules. They were attacking the entire social order. Their disobedience was an insult that demanded a response. And Rome's response was theatrical cruelty. Arena officials orchestrated executions like stage performances. Victims were placed before starved lions, enraged bears, or leopards kept hungry for days to guarantee aggression. Animal handlers meticulously planned feeding schedules. They didn't want quick killings. They wanted drama. They wanted prolonged violence. They wanted the crowd entertained. Sometimes the condemned were tied to posts, sometimes chained to platforms, sometimes left standing alone, trembling in the center of a sandpit soaked with blood from earlier executions. Some women were burned alive. Others were forced to reenact mythological scenes twisted into grotesque parodies. Others were handed blunt swords or dull knives in order to fight fellow prisoners until someone collapsed in the dust. There was no mercy. Survival wasn't part of the script. And the audience cheered. Roman poet Martial wrote about spectators wagering on details of a woman's death, how long she would remain standing, whether she would scream, how an animal would tear into her. Human suffering became a sporting event, a pastime shared by thousands. Between killings, arena slaves dragged bodies away with hooks. Torn limbs were tossed into baskets, blood soaked into the sand until the ground became a thick red paste. Each new wave of executions layered fresh horrors over dried stains. For female slaves, the degradation extended beyond pain. They were displayed nude before crowds, stripped both literally and symbolically of dignity. They were given roles that framed their death as entertainment, as if their final moments were nothing more than a performance. The message was unmistakable. Your life is not your own. Your suffering is ours to watch. Your death is ours to decide. Fourth punishment, whipping. In the empire didn't stop at public executions. Rome had punishments so horrifying, so total, that even the arena seemed merciful by comparison. If branding carved a woman's disobedience into her skin, and the arena tore her body apart for the entertainment of the masses, Rome still had another path, one that didn't rely on spectacle at all. It relied on repetition, routine, pain administered not as a show, but as maintenance. Whipping. In Roman society, the whip was more than a tool. It was a philosophy. Every lash declared ownership. Every strike reasserted the master's dominion. The preferred instrument was the flagrum, a multi-tailed whip reinforced with fragments of bone, metal, or even sharpened glass. Calling it a whip barely does it justice. It was a device engineered to shred flesh. Legally, a master needed no justification to use it. A runaway slave provided more than enough excuse. But even without provocation, the whip hung ready in most Roman households, an everyday object as common as a broom or a cooking pot. When a woman fled and was dragged back, the flagrum became a ritual, a reminder, a reinforcement of hierarchy. Unlike courtroom punishments or public branding, whipping required no witnesses. It could happen anywhere, in a courtyard, behind a stable, inside a cellar. The location didn't matter. What mattered was that the woman learned where she stood in the Roman order, and that everyone watching learned it too. There were no rules, no limits. The number of lashes was entirely up to the owner's mood. 100, 500, enough to break bone, enough to kill. Roman law had nothing to say on the matter. The whip was constructed to maximize destruction. When it struck, each tail latched into the skin before tearing outward. The first blows opened cuts, the 5th or 10th ripped deeper, carving trenches into muscle. After dozens, the flesh began to peel away. The back became a map of agony, strips of torn skin hanging loose, patches of exposed bone glowing white beneath blood. Women who received these punishments often fell unconscious, but even that offered no protection. Many masters ordered whippings to continue until the enforcer grew tired, not the victim. The goal wasn't discipline, it was domination, and the aftermath was nearly worse. Treatment was not permitted, not for days, sometimes not for weeks. Wounds were left open and festering, attracting flies and maggots. Infection ate into the tissue. The pain never stopped. Every movement pulled torn flesh. Every breath burned. Every night brought new agony as the mangled skin stiffened, cracked, and bled. Some women never recovered the ability to stand upright. Their muscles healed in unnatural knots. Scar tissue formed thick ridges across the back. Some were permanently disabled. Others died slowly over days or weeks from blood loss, shock, or sepsis. And in Rome, all of this was ordinary. Writers of the era, Horace, Juvenal, Petronius, mention these punishments casually as background details woven into their stories. A joke here, a complaint about unruly slaves there. Their tone carried no outrage. Instead, The whip simply existed, part of daily life, as unremarkable as the weather. Fifth punishment, damnatio in meta lump for a slave woman. Being dragged back after escape meant returning not to a life she once knew, but to a darker existence. The whip represented a turning point, an escalation of cruelty meant to ensure she never risked another attempt. Because Rome wanted obedience, not silence, not compliance, obedience, and for those who still harbored a spark of defiance, Rome had one last punishment waiting, a final destination where the goal wasn't merely to hurt or kill, where the empire sought to extinguish the very idea of resistance. The mines, damnatio in metallum, a phrase that promised an ending so bleak that even seasoned Roman soldiers avoided speaking of it too plainly. The mines were Rome's underworld made real dark, suffocating, endless. A place where daylight ceased, where the sun and sky felt like memories from another life. A place that didn't simply kill, it consumed. Deep beneath provinces like Noricum, Dalmatia, and Sardinia lay labyrinths of tunnels so cramped that workers crawled rather than walked. The air carried choking clouds of dust, toxic minerals, and rot. Torches flickered against walls stained with centuries of labor and death. For enslaved women, the mines were torment laid upon torment, eternal darkness, endless work, no protection from guards, no escape, no mercy. They hauled stones until their shoulders split open. They carved rock until their palms bled raw. They breathed poison every minute of every day. Enrollment officials kept ledgers cold, efficient lists tracking production, not people. A woman's name didn't matter. Her output did. Exposure to mercury and lead slowly destroyed the body. Teeth loosened and fell. Gums rotted. Vision blurred. Fingers trembled uncontrollably until holding tools became impossible. But even then, work continued. A woman could collapse, shaking uncontrollably, hallucinating from metal poisoning, and guards would drag her deeper into the shafts, chaining her away from others to die unseen. In the event of a cave-in, a common event, the trapped were simply abandoned. Administrators didn't organize rescue attempts. They wrote off the dead, reassigned the living, and moved production to a different tunnel. Those trapped inside suffocated in the dark, clawing at rock walls until their fingers split. Some screamed for hours, some for days. Their bodies stayed where they fell. No burial, no ceremony, just a corpse decomposing beside the ore it once dug. Generations of miners stepped past these remains, breathing the same toxic air that had killed those before them. This punishment was so horrific that even the arena filled with beasts and blood seemed merciful by comparison. In the arena, death was quick. In the mines, death was a process, a slow unraveling of flesh, mind, and identity. Women sent to the mines didn't return. Rome didn't intend them to, because mines weren't just prisons, they were erasers. A fugitive woman sent underground was meant to disappear from the world above, swallowed by stone and forgotten. The systematic nature of Roman cruelty, and yet, despite all of this, ancient historians recorded these punishments with a detachment that chills modern readers. Suetonius wrote about them with the same tone used to describe imperial banquets. Tacitus listed them with no moral commentary, as if discussing tax laws. Seneca, perhaps the most sympathetic of them all, admitted that slaves were human beings, yet never called for the abolition of the system destroying them. Rome's cruelty was not a secret, it was simply accepted, normalized, woven into the bones of the empire. Thousands of women lived through these horrors. Countless more died. Most left no records, no names, no graves. But the punishments they endured reveal something vital about Rome, not just its brutality, but its precision, its ability to convert suffering into a system, to turn pain into policy. This wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was organized, managed, institutionalized. And Rome's final punishment brings everything into focus: not torture, not execution, but the weaponization of invisibility. A punishment where a woman's existence could be deleted, overwritten, or consumed by the empire's machinery. A punishment that reveals the darkest truth about how Rome maintained its power through the systematic erasure of those who dared to resist.